Hello, I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and today I'm bringing you a discussion-focused video about what I'd like to see in Dragon Age Dreadwolf. I've wanted to make this video ever since I created my channel, but I wanted to wait a little bit to gather my thoughts on what exactly I'm interested in seeing by replaying all of the games in the series and noting down their positives and negatives. This is my own very subjective opinion, of course, but I found it fun to take notes on the games I love. Later on, I will also make some longer videos discussing each game in the Dragon Age series and their positives and negatives. First, I want to address the leaks that have circulated online. I think it's very disrespectful to show unfinished parts of a game, things that may not even end up being in the final game at all, to both existing and potential fans. If it's a quote-unquote positive leak, it could cause disappointment in the future if what people were excited for is no longer in the game, or if it's just a tiny part or has changed a lot by the time it was released. If it's a quote-unquote negative leak, then it will foster doubt about the game among the fans, as well as cause distrust towards the developer because of the contents of the leak raising questions that the developer most likely cannot answer at the time. I've seen some discussions of the leaks online, but I've never actually seen any of the leaked gameplay myself, but from what I've seen, I'm genuinely not bothered. I've been a Dragon Age fan since I first played Dragon Age Origins in 2010, and even if Dreadwolf is very different from the other Dragon Age games, which I absolutely expect, seeing as each entry in the Dragon Age series has so far been very different from the others, I don't care. It will still be at its core a Dragon Age game, in a Dragon Age setting, with Dragon Age type writing, so I know I'm going to like it regardless of how true or not it stays to previous titles. Will it be my favorite Dragon Age game? That I don't know. But I know I'm most likely going to enjoy playing it a lot because I enjoy playing all of the other Dragon Age games. Now let's get into the meat of the video. Since I'm talking about a Dragon Age game, I'm going to split the discussion into a few different topics that I feel are most relevant: world, story, characters, gameplay, and romance/relationships. In terms of world, we had an interesting teaser trailer showing us a few different areas it will likely travel to during the game. The four main nations we see in the trailer are Tevinter, Antiva, Ravain, and the Anderfels. Of course, we already knew Tevinter was going to be involved in the next Dragon Age from the ending of Trespasser and Inquisition. Will these four nations be the only ones we're going to explore in Dreadwolf? 4 countries is already more than the previous titles, and I'm definitely interested in all of these. However, I would also like to explore some other places, like the country of Navarra, the dwarven city of Kal Sharok, and the Black City in the Vade. In Navarra City, I would like to visit the Grand Necropolis and get to learn more about the Mortalitasi. My favorite short story in Dragon Age Tevinter Nights was actually Down Among the Dead Men by Sylvia Feketikuti, which takes place in the Grand Necropolis. I'm wondering if we'll get the main character of that short story as a companion? Maybe. But even more than the Grand Necropolis, Navarra is a country with a history of dragon hunters, royal dynasties, and a powerful military, so I'm incredibly curious to see the country for myself in-game. We've heard about Kal Sharok being the only known surviving dwarven city other than Orzammar ever since Dragon Age Origins, and I'd love to see how different the culture is there. I also think it's possible for us to go there because the city lies beneath the Hunterhorn Mountains, which are between Orlais and the Anderfels. So since we get to visit the Anderfels, which were teased in the trailer, I think out of all 3 locations I want to visit, Kal Sharok is the most likely. I also wonder if they would be interested in anything to do with the surface world, and if they are, if we would get a dwarven companion from there. Finally, the Black City. Need I say more? It's been talked about extensively since Dragon Age Origins, and with the kind of intriguing but incomplete information about the Elven Pantheon we got in Inquisition, I want to know so much more about the Black City and everything surrounding the various religions in Thedas. Did the Maker actually exist? Who were the children he cast away? Is there a difference between the Elven gods and the Tevinter gods, or are they the same beings known under different names? And the distant looming shadow of the Black City, always present in the Vade wherever you are, is just so compelling. I want to go there. I want to know what exactly is there. How did it get corrupted? When did it get corrupted? And by whom? Of course, I'm also interested in the islands of Parvolin, the Qunari homeland, but from the teaser trailer, it's likely that the Qunari are coming to us, not the other way around, though who knows, maybe in a DLC, if there's going to be a world left to explore. That brings me to story, because there is a lot to consider here. The question of, is there going to be a world left to explore after Dragon Age Dreadwolf is a big one. There are a lot of discussions about what the world could look like at the end of Dreadwolf. Some people assume Solas will succeed in his sundering of the Veil, and afterwards the world will be destroyed, or maybe simply become way different from what it currently is. If this sundering of the veil does succeed, I am a believer in the latter, that the world will simply change, that maybe everyone in Thedas is going to have magical abilities. That to me sounds like a compelling situation to explore in future games. I love the idea of a dreamer or spirit-themed age being next after the Dragon Age is over. I feel like the Dragon Age setting has so much story potential because with every new age, the world can change dramatically. Though I would also be interested in actually playing games set before the Dragon Age, as long as the story can still have consequences and reactivity, but work with the various canon details that we know about these historical periods. Something important that I'd like to see return in Dreadwolf are origin stories. One of the main reasons why Dragon Age Origins is a beloved game is the fact that it has playable origin stories, which help you get immersed in the world and story of the game with the particular perspective of your character. And of course, there are also nods to your origin later on, as you may come across various characters from your origin, as well as having unique dialogue options stemming from your background. Inquisition did have some dialogue options based on your class and race, but for me, it didn't feel like a strong enough connection, and I would have loved to know exactly what my character's experience in the world had been previous to the Conclave, where they came from, who the important people in their lives were, that kind of thing. Without a playable origin or a strong playable prologue setting up my character's backstory, I feel like my character is too much of a blank slate, and I'm unable to feel immersed in the world, so it's much harder to roleplay. Next, I want to mention quests. Please, for the love of God, no useless fetch quests or collection quests. If you do have something that's basically a fetch quest, make it interesting. With collections, make them smaller, easier to complete, and with some kind of story reward that you receive as you add to the collection that's slightly more interesting than just a small paragraph of flavor text. One thing that ruined my immersion in Inquisition was that so many side quests were things that the Herald and later Inquisitor, being the only person who could close rifts and deal with the breach, shouldn't have been doing at all. Find caches with blankets and supplies for refugees, hunt rams, gather herbs for a healer, bring back someone's prized druffalo. These are things that any of the Inquisition scouts and soldiers that we see in decently large numbers in the hinterlands should have been able to do themselves. Or if you give the player control on how to solve these problems, then make them be able to delegate some of these to other Inquisition members. I don't necessarily think we'll have the same issue with quests in Dreadwolf, as I don't think we're going to have a big organization like the Inquisition anymore. However, it's more about the internal logic of the quests. Sure, someone thought to design this quest, but does it actually belong in that area? And does it actually belong in the quest log of the player character? If it belongs in the area and with the general story, but doesn't fit with what the player thinks is compelling to do, then make it something that characters talk about in ambient dialogue, or a situational conflict that the player comes into contact with as a third party. And please don't add any quests that take actual real-world time, other than perhaps a maximum of a half hour if they really have to. Dragon Age isn't an MMO, it's a single-player experience. So if a player wants to spend 8 hours playing in a day and complete a large number of quests, they should be allowed to do so. Being gated to wait for real-world hours or even full days sometimes, only to unlock a mount or get a side quest reward is not fun. So this is what I want to see in Dreadwolf. Fun side quests that make sense to be there and that are compelling to be involved in. In terms of main quests, I would like to see a more non-linear approach, for us to be able to complete at least some of the main quests in whatever order we want, and for our choices regarding that to have possibly different consequences, or at least reactivity from NPCs that acknowledge the journey we chose to take through the main storyline. I like the Outer Worlds for how they approach the main story and the way the player could move through it, and I'd like for Dreadwolf to also have more ways to approach solving these quests. I have personally particularly come to dislike killing my way through everything when it would make more sense for enemies to give up or retreat from battle, or for me to be able to get past them through either stealth or speech. That's one of the weak points of the Dragon Age series for me, especially as I get older and hack and slash type of progression isn't that satisfying anymore. I enjoy combat, but I like having the agency to choose when to fight and when to sneak or talk my way through, or to avoid a situation entirely, to choose how my character would approach difficult and dangerous situations. I feel like some of the main quests in the Dragon Age games feel like disparate pieces glued together that don't actually fit very well, like a puzzle where you clearly see the edges of the pieces where they combine. In Origins, the Urn of Sacred Ashes quest, for example, feels particularly out of place. It's interesting, but it doesn't make that much sense for the Warden to make a long detour in search of something that possibly doesn't even exist. Similarly, there's other main quests in all three games that feel a bit forced. Why would your character be actually involved in this? I'm hoping for a more complex and cohesive main story that makes me genuinely want to see what's next, as well as a story that has genuinely difficult, morally gray choices to make. I want Dreadwolf's creative vision to be stronger and tighter, and ideally for it to go back to its more dark fantasy roots. There's so many games where you get to play the goody two-shoes hero. I want to have something deeper than that, where even someone who wants to do as much good as they can will still inevitably fall short, because they won't be able to choose the right or best choice because there is none. And if you want to not be the good guy, you will also have more options to choose from. When it comes to companions, I have perhaps the strongest opinions on what I want to see in Dreadwolf. And no, I'm not talking about a Qunari or Dwarven woman, a romanceable dwarf, or any particular characters that I'd like to see either as companions or see them return in some capacity in Dragon Age Dreadwolf. What I really want to talk about is how companions and your interactions with them are written. There are some companions in all the Dragon Age games that fell really flat for me. In Origins, for example, Sten murdered a whole family, he constantly questions your authority, and he even challenges you to a fight during a main quest that you can't skip, which makes no sense. And as desperate as the Grey Wardens may be for allies, it doesn't make much sense why Sten is a recruitable companion if this is how he behaves. Oghren is a walking sexual harassment. He is drunk most of the time, and it's very questionable what value he brings to the team other than, "Brr her, I can swing a big weapon." In Dragon Age 2, Sebastian doesn't play well with the rest of the team, his views are quite extreme, and with the whole grey morality thing, that kind of thinking is best suited for villains, not companions, but hey, at least he's a DLC companion so you can just ignore him. In Inquisition, Vivienne is unchangeable. She doesn't grow or change at all during the whole story. She feels very flat. I found out that she was originally supposed to be an advisor for the Inquisition, and that definitely shows in her writing, even in her companion quests. She doesn't want to get her hands dirty, so she approves less of you doing her tasks if you take her along with you. She doesn't actually want to listen to what you're saying, and she constantly belittles a lot of your companions in their conversations. The Inquisitor's interactions with Sarah are also particularly strange. You have to agree with her or else she's going to scream at you and even threaten you, but you also don't really have an option where your Inquisitor can understand what Sarah is talking about. So I tend to joke that with Sarah you have three options. You can agree condescendingly in order to placate her, you can disagree condescendingly implying that she's crazy or stupid, or make a joke that more often than not involves making fun of her anyway. All of these companions that I've mentioned, not only do they have weird kinds of personalities and backstories that feel like strange narrative decisions to have been made for them, but they just don't work well as teammates. I would like to say, I actually find most of these companions interesting, and I'd love for them to be written with just a little bit more nuance, just a little bit more possible character development. I particularly love Sarah and Vivienne, but if I play with them in my party, I have to actively limit my Inquisitor's interactions with them in order to not feel deeply uncomfortable with their borderline abusive behavior towards my Inquisitor while playing the game. I understand that these companions are just a few out of the decently large amount that we get in the games, but to me, the fact that they exist at all in this particular way shows me that there's something wrong in the approach of the writers. I've heard it said by way too many people that the worst thing you can have is a boring character, a character that players are simply meh about, and that the best thing you can have is characters that players have extreme reactions to, either love or hate. I think any kind of writing rule needs to be taken with a grain of salt because no rule is ever universal, and the way you understand it and apply it also changes everything. I think it's absolutely fine to make polarizing characters that have very strong and very different perspectives and personalities, and that will naturally make people gravitate towards some and away from others. However, if you go out of your way to make an unlikable or straight up hateable character on purpose, that's not the same thing. Making a character difficult to like at all on purpose just seems like a bad idea to me, especially if they're not a villain, especially in the context of that character being a recruitable companion who's supposed to want to help you, who's supposed to be willing to not only collaborate with the player character, but also defer to their decisions. These characters like Vivienne, Aveline, Sarah, Sten, they're written like a brick wall. You can talk and try to make all sorts of different choices and arguments as you like, but they're written as though they are a character in a sitcom that is never allowed to change, so that more story can keep being churned out with the same cast of characters. But Dragon Age games aren't sitcoms, and they have constantly changing casts of characters, so this writing decision really confuses me. As a summary for this section, I hope Dreadwolf has companions who actually belong in a team, who want to collaborate and follow the player's lead, even if some of the player's choices are ones they wouldn't personally make. And if those decisions the PC makes are too much, go too far according to the personal philosophy of that companion, then that companion can absolutely go ahead and leave or make a scene or even fight you on it. One thing that I think none of the Dragon Age games have managed to do in a really satisfying manner, in my opinion, is have a good relationship system. The closest I think they ever got was in Dragon Age 2 with the friendship and rivalry system, which added a layer of complexity to your interactions with your companions. It was interesting to see how they acted differently towards you as well as in general in the story based on your type of relationship with them. But I still feel that overall the approval and disapproval points or friendship and rivalry points don't really work that well in terms of story and immersion. People don't necessarily come to dislike you because you make different choices than they would, as long as they can understand your motivations and it doesn't hit their core beliefs. Similarly, people don't necessarily like you because you have the same opinions. The opposite can actually happen. Oftentimes we come to dislike people who are too similar to us. I'm aware that we're talking about video games here, and such complexity in terms of characters is very difficult, but I still think there must be a better way than like or dislike based on if they agree or disagree with a choice you make, or extra likes if you do something they asked you to do or get them a gift. It's a very transactional and capitalist way of looking at relationships, and I don't think it's necessarily the kind of way Dragon Age writers want to portray these relationships. It's just something that results out of the way the systems are designed to work in the game. I feel a bit icky about romances in Dragon Age the more I think about them, even in Inquisition where they made companions have certain preferences in terms of their sexuality and also made them racist for various reasons. It's still a matter of, have you flirted X times with this character? Are you a race and gender they are not biased against? And do you have decently high approval points in order to initiate a romance? As a teenager and young adult, I didn't really think about this in detail, so it didn't bother me, but as I've had more experiences in life, it really squicks me out that it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't really matter what choices you made, as long as you don't have too many disapproval points. All it matters is that you check some boxes in terms of race and gender, or more accurately sex, since you can't be trans in Dragon Age yet, and that you choose the flirt option most of the time when the opportunity arises, even if in some situations it's really an awkward time to be flirting. I've heard that the Pillars of Eternity games have done some interesting things with these kinds of relationship systems, though I have heard that in Deadfire there were some issues with some of the relationships between companions, but I like the general idea of having topics that the characters have a certain position on, and having interactions both between the player character and the companion, as well as between companions that can affect how they feel towards others around them. I think it's an interesting starting point for a system, and could point towards an approach that feels more immersive and organic in terms of companion relationships. I don't personally have a specific idea yet on how to improve this relationship and approval system, but I hope that Dreadwolf takes a step in the right direction, whatever that direction may be. I just want to see more complex relationships developing in more organic ways and being less transactional. In terms of game mechanics, I'll address combat first. I personally don't mind how combat works as long as it continues to be real-time with pause like in the previous titles. I didn't use a tactical camera very much in Origins and Inquisition, though it was occasionally useful when I wanted to look at the battlefield or cast a specific area of effect ability pretty far away, but I don't think it would be a huge loss for Dreadwolf to lose the tactical camera. In terms of the feel of combat, I think Inquisition did a great job of making each class feel enjoyable to play. It really managed to do what it set out to do, to take the best aspects of combat from both Origins and Dragon Age 2 and combine them to make something that's greater than the sum of its parts. What I do want to see from Dreadwolf combat, as opposed to Inquisition, is more build variety, in the form of having more abilities and upgrades to choose from, as well as more than 3 specializations per class. I thought the Inquisition specializations were quite limited and they didn't feel very impactful to me. They were also very annoying to unlock with what essentially amounted to fetch quests, so if we have such an in-game quest to unlock specializations in Dreadwolf, I would like the quest to be more interesting, to have a reason to want to do that because it's a cool quest, not just because it unlocks a new set of abilities. Could be actually interesting as well if it also unlocks some dialogue options or reactivity from companions and other characters. As a very special personal request in terms of combat, I would love to see full weapon dual wielding return for warrior characters in Dreadwolf. In Dragon Age Origins, that's my favorite type of build. Swinging 2 longswords or axes or what have you is just a lot of fun, so I'd love to see it return in Dreadwolf, though I know that it's very unlikely. In regards to the possibility of not being able to take direct control of companions that some people have mentioned due to a leak, I hate leaks, I don't mind it, but only as long as I can set up AI behavior for companions in a detailed fashion. I didn't like the tactics system in Inquisition because it mostly just amounted to, does a character use this ability a lot, a little, or not at all? And that's just not very tactical in my opinion. The tactics options in Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 are quite comprehensive, though of course I think they can still be improved, and they allow you to set up your companions to act wholly independently in a way that actually works for the particular build that you give them. So that's what I'd like to see in Dreadwolf in terms of AI behavior, to be able to make any companion build viable through setting up each character's tactics. Of course, personally, I also like to micromanage my characters, so I would like to have control over companions, but it's not the end of the world if I don't. Finally, I want to mention crafting. Personally, I don't think Dragon Age should be a game about crafting, other than a limited amount of cool items, as well as crafting various consumables like potions to use in combat. My problem with the weapon and armor crafting in Inquisition was that you could craft extremely powerful gear, items that were way more powerful than any unique item that you could find in the game, and that essentially made those unique items irrelevant, because if you could just make something better, then why bother, just because some of the items have a unique look? Loot became just a source of coins so that you could buy crafting recipes and materials, not to mention stop and mine ore and gather herbs everywhere you went, as if you didn't have something better to do, like, save the world from the demons pouring out of all the rifts that only you could close. I think crafted gear is fine, but only if it has limitations. In Dragon Age Origins, for example, you can commission Drakescale and Dragonscale armor to be made by Wade, one of the most skilled human blacksmiths. The armor sets you receive out of that are powerful, and in many ways better than most of the other sets that you can find in the game. But because you can only get these sets one time, it makes these crafted items feel unique, because they are. Similarly, in the Soldier's Peak DLC, you can craft a sword out of a meteor ore, and you can choose whether it's a longsword or a greatsword. Again, great design, really nice looking weapon. Being made out of meteor ore makes it feel unique because it is, and it really feels like you have a reason to craft this extremely rare sword, other than just for its stats. In Dragon Age 2, you could create a weapon for yourself in the Legacy DLC, and that one also similarly felt fun to do and unique due to being directly linked to that specific story and place. In Inquisition, once you have the crafting recipes, you can craft anything you like out of any materials you like and have very overpowered gear that makes every single item in the game instantly become trash. I don't like it when some items are so much obviously better than most other items, even within seemingly the same tier. Just like a quest with choices having an obviously best choice, it feels like agency is taken away from you, or that you would have to purposefully choose something worse to play with if you don't engage with the system in the optimal way. Once you have a crafting system in your game, I think it's difficult to suddenly not have one anymore in the next one, so I expect Dreadwolf will most likely have a crafting system, though I would be happy to be wrong. The only thing I hope is that this one is not going to be as overpowered as the one in Inquisition, and that it's perhaps a bit more limited in its capabilities. I don't think we're going to have an organization as powerful as the Inquisition to justify having access to crafting amazing equipment all the time, even in industrial quantities to equip all of our followers with the best stuff ever that makes them practically invincible. I want to see a more measured, balanced approach to make crafting feel more meaningful, with various choices locking you out of a different piece of gear, like choosing to use a rare material for a rogue armor will mean you use up that material and that's it, you can't craft anything else with it. I'd also like to see crafting that maybe takes time or something. Here is perhaps a place where I would be happy to see some real-time minutes or hours being used, or better yet, a certain amount of quests to be completed before the crafting is complete. I like the second approach better since it means you actually have to do stuff in the world and not just sit there or exit the game and come back later to suddenly have your gear be ready, but it does complicate things a bit towards the end of the game when you may run out of quests to do. Finally, it's time for the miscellaneous category. I realized there were a few things that didn't neatly fit any of the categories I mentioned previously, but they didn't merit a category of their own in terms of discussing what I want to see in Dreadwolf. I want to mention a day and night cycle. I found that to be extremely fun in Dragon Age 2, even if it was just manually switching between day and night rather than it being an automatic cycle like in other RPGs like the Elder Scrolls games, Fallout, The Outer Worlds, etc. I loved seeing that same area look extremely different due to it being a different time of day, but what I really found even more compelling in Dragon Age 2 was that certain quests were only available during a certain time of day in that specific area. The world felt more alive in this way. So I am definitely hoping that Dreadwolf is going to have a day and night cycle, especially with how beautiful they've shown that they can make areas in Inquisition. It would be amazing to see them at all of the different times of day. Music is a thing that may seem small to some, but to me it's a very important aspect of my immersion. I love Inon Zur's music, and I associate him with Dragon Age so much so that whenever my partner is playing Fallout 4, I think they're playing a Dragon Age game because I hear Inon Zur's soundtrack. No hate towards Trevor Morris or whoever composed the music in Inquisition, but for me, it just sounded like basic fantasy movie music, and it didn't help me feel immersed at all. It actually took me out of my immersion. So every time I play Inquisition, I play it with the music turned off. My personal wish for Dreadwolf soundtrack is for it to be composed by Inon Zur, but if they didn't get him, then I at least hope that the songs feel more unique and full of character, and that they fit Dragon Age better. Character customization is also something I feel Dreadwolf can do a lot better with. The first 3 games in the series are quite old by this point, so I don't blame them for not being able to have a lot of options in character creation. However, we are now in 2024 and I want to see deeper customization, especially in terms of body types. I don't like how in Inquisition especially, elves are extremely skinny, even warriors. It doesn't make much sense to me that my skinny elf Inquisitor could be wearing heavy armor as well as carry a huge ass sword on their back and be able to move, let alone fight in that. So in Dreadwolf, I want at the very least to have different body types based on the class that we choose, or to be able to choose whichever body type we want. And related to body types somewhat is something else I want to see in Dreadwolf: the option for our character to be trans. As a trans person myself, I found it uncomfortable to speak to Krem in Inquisition because my Inquisitor didn't have any option in dialogue to at least already know about trans people and be understanding and accepting, and there was certainly no option to tell Krem that our Inquisitor was also trans, which was something that I was imagining for my Inquisitor anyway. The most accepting option, in terms of Krem being trans, is to just not talk to him about it at all, which to me feels unacceptable. So I hope Dreadwolf does better in terms of trans representation in general, as well as hopefully letting us choose our character's pronouns and body type. I think Baldur's Gate 3, Cyberpunk, and Starfield have shown that this is becoming a base feature to include in RPGs, so in my opinion there is no excuse for Dreadwolf to forgo such options. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What would you like to see in Dragon Age Dreadwolf? Are there specific things you liked in previous games that you want to see return, or things that you dislike that you would like fixed or removed? Let me know in the comments, but for now, I hope you enjoyed this discussion about what I'd like to see in Dragon Age Dreadwolf. Remember, this is my personal opinion, and you don't have to agree. If you're looking forward to seeing more of my Dragon Age videos, as well as occasionally some videos on other RPGs, do remember to subscribe and leave a like and comment while you're at it too. This has been B Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.